The other day, I went over the conversion process I went through to turn this old Imperial battery-powered tube radio into a small guitar practice amp. And there was an issue with it. It was really quiet, and it really only worked for one day, because the next day I turned it on and no go. There was nothing coming out. So I think I've got a bad tube in here, and wanted to go through and show how I diagnosed the issue. First things first, I need to open the back up. All right, so I've got three tubes here. There's a 3S4, one S5, and a 1U4. Turns out that's the tube that was bad, but let me go through the testing of each of these and show you what the process is. So this is my test harness. It's got a 7-pin and a buck converter here to convert my 9-volt input into a 1.4 volts for the filament. And I've got some alligator clips that I can hook all this stuff up to the appropriate pin. I've got a 100K and a 1K resistor there in case I need to do some current limiting. Let me step you through what the testing process is. So I've got a printout of the 1S5 datasheet here. I've taken it out of the chassis, and I'm going to test this one first. According to the datasheet, it is a diode pentode. So we've got a negative filament, a no connection, plate 1, which is going over here to, that's the diode connection. It's a gate 2, which is going to these two, grid 2, which is going to these two grids. We've got the plates, grid 1, and the positive filament. So now I'm going to use my gator clips and hook all this stuff up. Got all these things. I try to do them color coordinated so I don't lose my place, and it makes it easier to see what I'm doing. All right, so starting off with the filament, the positive filament lead is pin 7. Okay, so that's pin 7, and it's coming down through this yellow gator clip over here to the plus 1.4 volt coming off the buck converter. All right, so this connection is ground, and I've got it going over to the power supply, which is going to be running 30 volts. All right, so also hooked up to ground. This is coming through this black gator clip up to pin 1, which is the negative filament lead. All right, and I'm borrowing that because that is ground. It's coming off of this green gator clip around to pin 6. I realize I'm doing this all out of order, but hang with me. Pin 6, which is grid 1, all right. Pin 5, that is my plate, which is going off to the positive power supply through this red gator clip. And I'm putting another red gator clip, which comes on around to pin 4, which is grid 2. Now, this particular tube, the 1S5, doesn't have a separate heater and cathode. So the cathode is a directly heated version. There's no separate cathode. Instead, I run my 1.4 volts through the heater, and that's the directly heated cathode, which ejects the electrons across the grids up to the plate, which is going to be a positive 30 volts. Right, so now how do I measure the current? Well, there's one thing I didn't show you in all of this spaghetti here, that is the positive power supply is actually coming in from the power supply to this test lead, which is hooked up to my ammeter, and then through the other lead, it's coming to that. Okay, so that's actually my power supply. I fooled you there for a little bit. So I've got plus 30 coming in, into the ammeter, out this is the other probe, then to the gator clips, up to the plate, and also to the grid 2. Okay, back and slightly repositioned, and I've got my other voltmeter here so I can measure some voltages coming in. I've got my tube in place. I've got 9 volts coming in. This is going, okay, 9 volts from another power supply through the buck converter up to the filaments, and it's getting that tube nice and warm. All right, so reading the voltage on the filament, I'm at positive 1.4. All right, so I've got my ammeter on. This one doesn't automatically adjust, so depending on what the readout is, I'm expecting to get 1.5 milliamps. So that should be okay for that. 30 volts should be on. Test that by touching here. Okay, so there's my 30 volts coming across the plate. And what do I have here? 0.35. So that's 355, 356 microamps. The way I have it with the gridded ground and the grid 2 hooked up to the plate, I actually have this in triode configuration, so it's a slightly different set of curves. So there's my 30 volts, and there's my 0 grid line, and yeah, at 350 microamps, that's about right, because that's at my 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5 milliamps. So not very much, but I can run the grid slightly more positive and still get a decent reading. Now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook up the grid to the filament, which will give me a 1.4. It should push it up into here, and I'll get a much more interesting and reliable reading. Checking with that. Okay, I'm at 1.418, and now I've got 1.02 milliamps. So 30 volts on the plate, 1.4 volts. So I'm actually going to be a little bit south of there, but 0.5, 1, I am pretty dangerously close to that curve. So it looks like this tube is reading good. All right, I'm happy with that. Let's take a look at the tube that was not good, and I can show you what I found. So here is the 1U4. This is the tube that's the reason why it wasn't coming out that loud, and eventually not coming out at all. That tube went bad. All right, so the pinout for the 1U4 is completely different from the 1S5. Pin 7 is still the positive filament. Pin 1 is still the negative filament connection. Pin 2 is the plate. Pin 3 is gate 2, no connection on the 4th. 5th is a gate 3, also combined with the negative filament. And pin 6 is gate 1. So I need to change some things around. Okay, so tube is in place. Get the filament voltage hooked up. Got my 1.4 on the filament going. Power is on. Okay, so I'm only getting 300 microamps. So here I am at 30 volts with a 0 voltage grid. I should be way up here at 1.5 milliamps, 300 microamps. So even though I know I'm not supposed to read this off of the pentode lines, this output is very, very low. What I'm going to do in some upcoming videos is I'm going to figure out how do you get a decent sound out of these little 7-pin pentodes? Because right now it's way too quiet. But anyway, so there's my tube tester. All right, thanks guys.